Let's kick it off. Welcome, everyone, to this second edition of our Into Design System Meetup. Before we start, I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. We're back with the second edition of our Design System Meetup today, Into Design Systems, the Australia edition. Funnily enough, there's been a few popping up lately. So we now also have a Seattle one, we have a German one, we have they're everywhere now, which is great. It's a meetup for designers, developers, product people, really anyone that's into design systems and working on design systems. If you were here last time, welcome back. If it's your first time joining us in person or online, welcome. I hope you enjoyed. My name's Marc. Unfortunately, last time I couldn't make it because I was sick, so big thanks to Rich for helping out and hosting the session last session, a couple months ago. And you might also notice a new face. So we have Michael joining us as well.
Oh, I actually do this.
So everything in the background, that's Michael's magic. He's making sure that everything's running smoothly, everyone knows where to go, speakers have their own little rooms and makeup stations, etc., etc. So that's all set up very well.
Station.
Yeah, the powder room.
Totally arranged that, yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. With all that in mind, I also just want to, if you want, you can run now, or you can stay here, up to you. Comedic outro. Yeah, I just wanted to say a quick thank you to WiseTech Global for hosting us again. Just like last time, this whole event takes a lot of effort to put together, as you may know, and as you've just seen. So thanks to Charlie and the team for putting everything together. Thanks to WiseTech in general for helping us and for everyone being involved in this. Absolutely great. And while we have so many design system experts in the building, I just wanted to be doing a quick cheeky shout out. We're looking for a senior UI designer for my design system team here at WiseTech. So if you are interested in, pursuing new opportunities, find me after the talks. Happy to have a chat, give you a bit of an intro. There's a whole bunch of us here as well today. Maddie, our head of design, is somewhere, I saw him before. He's eating pizza somewhere. And you'll see Tulsa and Dan running around with a little supply t-shirt, which is the name of our design system. And with this little segue, I'm handing over to Morgan, our sponsor for today's event, giving us a little intro.
Yeah, just wanted to say hello, my name's Morgan. I'm a design recruiter at Sustain. That's quite funny, actually, you're looking for a UI designer. I mean, maybe we can talk about that later. Totally joking. But no, it's awesome to be sponsoring this event tonight. At Sustain, like a huge part of our values is giving back to the communities we recruit for. It's so cool to see a design system specific event happening regularly in Sydney as well. I think it's definitely been craved by a lot of people in the community. So yeah, thank you for bringing me in, Marc. It's absolutely awesome. So yeah, but if anyone wants to come say hello after this, I'd be happy to chat then. But yeah, thanks for having me in.
Yeah, talk to me first before you.
Absolutely. I'll segue that.
All right. And then also, just an FYI, so Into Design System, I hope most of you know it, it's an actual online conference that's been started 5 or 6 years ago or something like that. There has now been the next Into Design conference. The dates have been confirmed, so it's in May 2025. Early bird tickets are now available, so if you do consider attending, please jump on that QR code, get your early bird tickets. It's significantly cheaper than as if you were to wait. This is an annual conference. It's probably the biggest conference at the moment for design system practitioners. So if you want to connect and learn from other experts in the field, this is probably the way to go. And also stay around until the end because we have a little announcement and a little surprise for everyone. And I think I'm now throwing it over to Rich to introduce our speakers.
Okay, Joe. Thank you, Marc. It's me again. In case you missed it, my name's Rich, and I'll be introducing the speakers for this evening. And I'll be doing that very shortly, so just bear with me while I kind of go over some housekeeping things. So for questions, people will be having questions throughout this session, and I guess after each speaker, we will be opening the floor for questions, depending on how we're going with time and things like that. We have a mixed audience, so we're going to try to balance the in-person and online questions a little bit. So for the people that are online, the FigJam board, I believe there's a link in a chat of sorts. So chuck your questions in there and we'll try to monitor those. So that covers the thing about the FigGen board. So a few important ones for the people that are here in person. Drinks, grab them from the fridge, help yourselves. Toilets over that way, there's signs over there. And exits can be found on either side of the auditorium as well. I have to say that one. A security point. So there's signage around the place. So please keep to this general area, so to the coffee cart, to the kitchen, things like that. I guess just because there's a few like hardware stuff that we sort of just need to keep in mind. And as for the last point, for socials, please feel free to share content, photos, and tag WiseTech Global on LinkedIn, Instagram, wherever we are. And I think that's it for the housekeeping stuff. So I'm going to get into introducing our first speaker for the evening, who is also, as it happens, our first engineering talk for the Meetup. So Ryan is a lead front-end engineer at Campaign Monitor by Marigold, with extensive experience developing design systems for Campaign Monitor, which is no surprise, but also frontendly.io. And in his talk, Ryan's going to share the technical yet practical aspects of CSS variables and how they can be used to create scalable and maintainable design systems. So please join me in welcoming Ryan Yu to the stage. I saw him, there he is. All right. Let's do the switch and hopefully the technology gods are on our side.
Oh yeah, here we go. Awesome. And also, usually when I talk, I start my timer because I don't want to go over, whatever time I am allowed to talk. So start. Hi everyone, my name is Ryan Yu, and I'm really excited to see you all here tonight. And today I'm going to talk about variables in design system, especially from the coding side. But before we get started, I'd like to give a big shout out to the team organizing this amazing conference and allowing us to use this awesome place and great time together here tonight. So thank you so much. So I am going to talk about setting up the CSS variables in design system, especially around like optimizing the variables from the coding side. But just a quick intro of myself. Hi, again, my name is Ryan Yu, and I am a lead front-end engineer at Marigold, and also co-founder of frontendly.io. And then also I am a co-author of the React book called The React Workshop. And I kind of remember when I wrote the first line of the book, that was during my honeymoon. And I had to write it every night when I come back from honeymoon in Italy. And that was very challenging, but I learned a lot from that, writing the book. And then also, I am a proud dad of a 4-year-old girl, my daughter, Chloe. And I think 2 years ago, so she was 2 at that time. But now she's much bigger and she has a strong opinions. So let's talk about the variables. And I'm gonna quickly touch on what the variables are. I'm sure that most of you already know what the variables are, but just in case, if someone's not quite sure what the variables are, then I'll quickly touch on that. And then let's dive into like CSS strategies. Especially I'm gonna focus on those 3 things, like scalability, extensibility, and maintainability. And then let's do the Q&A. So let's talk about what the variables are. So from Figma, I took it from Figma. They say like variables in Figma design store reusable values that can be applied to all kinds of design properties and prototyping actions. And that is the screenshot from one of my latest work called Design System, the design document, the Figma section. And that is the design side. And from developer's side, the MDN says CSS variables are entities defined by CSS authors that represent specific values to be reused throughout the document. And we call it CSS variables, and then also CSS custom properties. I think CSS custom properties are a bit more official way to say that, but I think they are pretty much the same thing. So throughout the presentation today, I'm gonna say like CSS custom properties, sometimes CSS variables, but they are the same thing. And this is a screenshot that I took of my code. So there is a variable. So the variables are like entities, like a box that we can store the values, and we can reuse this in anywhere in the design system. And I am a developer and engineer, so today's presentation is from the coding side, and then try to show how we set up the CSS variables, and then how we align it with the design side. And then also, this is not about like finding the right or wrong answer. It's more of sharing my ideas, my findings, and then my learnings, and then also my experience that I found that worked really well. And then also, there are many different parts we can talk about, like typography, layout, sizing, spacing, but like we only have like a limited time today, so let's focus on color today, which is, I think, one of the most important part of design system. And then also a lot of screenshots from Core Design System, which is my latest work. So I have developed multiple design systems so far, and one of the biggest one was Campaign Monitor Design System, CMDS from Campaign Monitor, and I learned so much from there, and then I put that in all the things into Core Design System, and then also upgraded some part of like design system, and then variables as well. So I'm gonna share that with you tonight. All right, so let's jump on to the CSS strategies. So I'm gonna focus on three things: scalability, extensibility, and maintainability. If you are from code background, or I think designers are saying, there are a lot of methodologies, philosophies that help us write better code, right? And when I write the code, when I create components for design system, I always think about these three things. And then I wrote an article about these three things in CSS Tricks a few years ago. So if you wanted to find out more about this, check this out. So yeah, let's talk about scalability. So let's say we have a blue button, right? And let's put it into the header. Now we use this blue button in header, which is very straightforward. But now we wanted to scale. We wanted to use this into the form, or a part of the content, or maybe footer. But the important part here is when we scale this button, we want to make sure that this blue button always needs to be blue button, right? We don't want to have this blue button suddenly purple if we put it in somewhere. So let's see how we write CSS code. So we have color blue custom property. So we start with the double dash, and there we give the name. So I called it color blue. And then we store the blue color into the color blue custom property. And then we use it into color blue of the background color using var function in CSS. So this is very straightforward. So we can have this color blue and then use it in the background color. And then now, we have other components. For example, heading or links and some other components as well. And then we can reuse this color blue, other places as well. So for example, color of the link or color of the heading as well. So that is a very good example of how we can use this CSS custom property. And then variables. But let's think about a scenario that we wanted to change the heading only a little bit slightly lighter blue. Then new developer jump in and then say like, oh, okay, so I found the heading there. It uses color blue. I go find the color blue in the root pseudo class. And then let's change this to lighter blue. And there is a problem because this color blue is shared in many other places. And this is always happening. Like you're gonna say, hey Ryan, who's gonna do this? This is so extreme example, right? But in reality, something similar always happens. So how can we improve this, right? So this is the common challenges that we always see in the CSS world. So we change it somewhere and then something else changes. So how can we improve this, right? So to improve this, the good way is to separate into primitive value and then semantic value. So by providing this semantic value, we have a more meaningful name. So for example, color heading. And then we assign this color blue into color blue, the color heading, and then we use this color heading into the color of the heading. So that way, we can make sure that this light blue get used in the heading, and then we use this heading into the color of the heading. And then now you may also say like, oh yeah, we can use this color heading in footer, right? CSS is like a forgiving language. It's not like JavaScript, it throws an error. Yeah, that is very possible, and that's always happening as well. But this is all about like improving our CSS code. Also, like there's kind of like a more extreme example in CMDS that we provided very ugly styles if you put the wrong CSS into a wrong place. But that's another things to talk about. But here, what I wanted to say is to make a scalable variables, separating into primitive and semantic value is kind of like a really good starting point. And then now, most of the time, this may work, right? So we have this color blue light, and we use it in the heading, and we know, oh, this is heading, and let's use it in the heading. And then now, let's, this is just showing this as a design flow, that blue is used in the button link, and then blue light is in the heading. But now let's think about this color blue light up there. So that's all right. But let's try to extend this color, right? So we have this range of colors. And in my previous example, I used this token name from darkest to lightest. And that's most of the time it's OK. But now let's try to introduce new color there between darkest and darker. And there is certainly a problem because I'm not quite sure what it's called. Like, is it darker or I don't know what it's called, right? And naming is hard, and that's okay. We are not alone. Phil Carter once said, there are only two hard things in computer science, caching validation and naming things. I think you may agree that naming component or naming variables is so hard, right? So let's improve this. I mean, that's totally fine. If you're already using this token name, that's totally fine. But just from my experience, when I try to introduce new color, it's a little bit not scalable, right? We can provide this number, which I've tried before as well for one of my design system work. And that works okay because it's a bit more scalable because now we can say like it's 15, right? But this is kind of like an arbitrary number. It's like a random number we gave to the variable name. And this is not directly related to the color. So when I look at this 20, so what does it mean by 20? We could use hex value, but like when I look at hex value, I have no idea what the color is, like a 003F75. It's so hard to understand what the color is. But again, it's okay if you're already using it, that's totally good. But from my experience, I've used lightness of the HSLA value, and it gives me quite a meaningful name, and it worked out really well as well. So HSLA consists of hue, saturation, lightness, and an alpha. And then let's say we have a 48% as a default blue color. So that is our branding name as a default color. And then now we know that any lightness value above 48, let's say like 85 or 90, we know that is the like light version of this default color. And then if we give like 30% of the lightness, we know that is the dark version of this blue color. So it's a more giving us a better choice, having like better communication between designers and developers as well. So let's say like if a designer says like, oh, we want to introduce anything between 30 and 40, then it's easier for us as a developer understand what that means as well. So the table below is the direct screenshot of our design system documentation, and that is the screenshot from my code. And again, it's okay if you use a hex value. Like hex value is cool. And also, these days, the text editor has extensions, like you can see the color straight away. So even if you don't know this hex value, it's totally fine. But just from my experience, HSLA gives me a bit better opportunity to understand this color a bit better way. And then also, if you are working on animation with the color, like web animation, micro interactions, I created this code pen quickly for this presentation, and I just changing the hue of the HSL to create this glow effect. So changing the color with JavaScript is really easy if you use HSL, because you can just change the hue value or saturation or lightness. So that is like how we could easily extend our code. And let's go back to the code we left from the scalability. So we used like color blue light, and I would go with like color blue 74. And we can now easily extend, say like color blue 30 if we have to provide a bit darker color. And that way, we can easily extend. And then it's also, easier to understand this blue 74 as well. And that is the table that I just showed in a primitive color. And then we have defined that semantic color in the design system Figma file that making use of primitive color. And then also that get used in the component as well. And then now as a developer, when I look at it, it's very straightforward. Now looking at the token from the primitive and a semantic color, and then just get the value and then put it in the code. And yeah, I can easily create this code here as well. Now when you look at this component side at the bottom left, I have added this semantic value in a button scope. And that is a little bit off topic, but this is another way that we can provide a consumer. When I say consumer, it's another engineer who uses design system, having like this styling API to easily update this background color or text color, instead of like providing like exposing all class and then engineer can just mess up with the styling. But that's, again, another topic to talk about later in the future when we have time. And lastly, let's talk about the maintainability. So I think a very good example with maintainability. Before I continue, am I speaking too fast? No, it's all right. Okay, cool. All right, cool. So the good example with maintainability is the dark mode. So a lot of companies starting to have like a dark and a light mode. It's not only because it looks cool, but also it provides a better battery life in the dark mode, and then also like for someone who has a bit of difficulties to read on the light mode. So it's kind of like a common practice now to provide dark mode, right? And with the maintainability, the aim is to have kind of like a single source of truth, right? So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But when we think about like light and then dark mode, it's kind of like we have to split it into two separate sections, like light mode and then dark mode. But yeah, let's talk about that. So here we have light mode, right? So white background with a black foreground. And then when we switch it to dark mode, we have black background with white foreground. When we put it side by side, it's going to look something like this. And yeah, let's write the CSS code. So as a default light color, we have white and then black primitive value, and then we use it as a background and a foreground as a semantic value, and then we use it in the component. So background color and the color of the body component. And then now, when we switch it to dark mode, we have the code below. So this is all the way, and I'm going to show you kind of like a new approach. And yeah, let's put it on the left now, and then right is a new way, and I'm going to red circle it. And the old way was that we had to reassign the value to the property, so background color and the color of the body. But now, because we are using CSS custom property, we can reassign the value to the CSS custom property straight away. So that means we don't have to touch the value of the property itself. So that's going to help a lot when we talk about maintainability. So let's take a look at this. So we have light and dark color palette. So on the light, it starts from lightest to the darkest. And then on the dark mode, we have like darkest to the lightest. And yeah, let's try to write the code and see what the challenges are. So on the lightest, okay, we have black and white color for the foreground and background. And then when we switch it to dark mode, we have neutral color for 86 and then 12. And then we assign it to foreground and background semantic variable. Okay, cool. Now let's create for the light mode. So I name it foreground light and then background light, and then we assign the value. And then now there is a problem because this is not light, this is dark, right? The light is here. So the level doesn't really match. So if we wanted to go with this approach, and I have to talk a little bit about like new way we can do with this, with the CSS. So there is like a light and then dark function, and then with the color scheme. Then with this new approach, we kind of have to go with this one. But the way that I used to do is that we can actually help to combine this into one place to organize this color. So let's talk about that. So we have researched a lot, and we found that actually we couldn't find any place helping us to solve this problem. So my designer and myself discussed it a lot, and we went back to here again. And then we thought about like, oh, okay, so this is light and then dark. And then we try to think about light is light mode. And then the variables on the dark side is like dark mode. But like, when we come back here, oh, we could actually override whatever the CSS custom properties we can assign, right? So instead of like splitting into light and then dark mode, we can actually combining all together and then coming up with one like name. The dim is kind of like we chose, like it's dimming the color. It kind of makes sense. But the name is not important here. The important thing here is the concept that we switch from light and dark mode into like one single source of truth. So here in default, we have like foreground and then background. We assign the black, white. And then we switch it to dark mode. Then we have like foreground, background. We reassign the value here. And then in dim 2, we assign those values. And then now on the dark mode, it's still the same dim 2. So we can actually have the same variable name. And then we can just change the value of the dim 2 color. So that's how we found that it works really well for working on the dark mode when we try to define this color with dim. And this is the screenshot from our Figma file. That there is a light, dark, and then from dim to inverse. And then this is the CSS properties that I have defined in our CSS code. Cool. So yeah, that is pretty much about like scalability, extensibility, and maintainability of CSS, how I actually write the CSS code, CSS variables, and there are many other things we can talk about. And yeah, like there are many different part of design systems we can talk about, and like for example, I don't know how much freedom we have to give to the consumer. Do we have to limit the freedom, or do we have to expose everything? So yeah, if you wanted to talk more about like design system, you want to discuss anything, yeah, let's connect, or we can just say hi. So yeah, I'm available at I am Ryan New in LinkedIn. And also, I write an article in frontend.io. So if you are interested in learning front-end technology, yeah, come along. And yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Switch over my laptop now, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thank you very much for that, Ryan. I hope everyone can hear me if I'm close enough to the microphone. We are running a little bit over, so we have time for a little bit of bump-in stuff. I love this type of talk because I guess I've kind of got speaker duty when it comes to these meetup sessions, and I like speaking with the speakers to understand where their heads are at. And I guess what I love about speaking to Ryan about this thing is kind of like seeing how different teams solve the same problems in a different way. And I guess the question that I had, which we kind of nerded out about a little bit, was guidance. And I suppose, how do you help your team on board to these concepts, like this concept of DIM and things like that? How do you transfer this knowledge of these concepts and kind of maintain this knowledge across your team as it grows? That was like the question that I think we've got time for.
Yeah, sure.
Selfishly, it's my question.
That's a good question, actually, because that's actually what I'm facing at the moment at Marigold. So I'm not working in a UI team anymore, and I am kind of switched my role as a lead front engineer. So we are gonna hire front-end engineer. So if anyone is interested, let me know. But yeah, it's kind of like onboarding things. And I think from my experience, the one-on-one is the best. Like, we meet each other on Zoom, like I'm remote, so in Zoom or face-to-face, and then go through it together. And then if there is any time available, we do like a pair programming, and then just to transfer knowledge into our team. And then also at the same time, I write documentation a lot. Like Confluence is one of my best places to play with. Like I write a lot of documentations and I try to take a video as well if it's possible, and just to provide as much information as possible. And like a DIM, that kind of things a little bit might be hard to understand, right? And then let's talk about it. And if you have any questions, just make a session and just try to transfer my knowledge into here. And then also, I really like to hear feedback as well. Like someone comes in and say oh, this is a very strange strategy, and then I go, so how can you improve this, right? So I think one-on-one and also pair programming is one of the best way to transfer the knowledge to their team.
Nice. Appreciate it. Thank you. Cool. All right, so we have our second speaker, and this next talk isn't going to go into design token structure or component setups, and it's not even specifically about design systems, but it's an area which directly relates to it, of course. And I love hearing about it because I'm, of course, talking about accessibility. And I guess to talk about this topic is our next speaker, Sarah Federman. So Sarah is currently a front-end engineer at Canva on their accessibility innovation team, where she focuses on tackling all the thorny accessibility challenges that come with building a collaborative design editor. And in her talk, Sarah will explore how to make sense of the various accessibility guidelines and how to apply them in practically in a design systems context. So with that, I would like to welcome Sarah to the stage.
Hello, I'm Sarah. I am a reformed design systems practitioner. I don't know what y'all call yourselves these days. I used to be there. Now I'm not. So I no longer have Twitter to rant about things. So now we're here. You're welcome. I'll try to be nice. So I want to talk a little bit about standards and specifications, and I thought this vintage graphic was kind of funny. It does give a little bit of a helpful visualization, though, I admit. So the W3C has 3 different accessibility guidelines. There's ATAG, WCAG, and UAAG. ATAG is for authoring tools, so content creation software like Canva. WCAG is used as a guideline for all of internet content, probably relevant to you. And then UAAG is for user agents, like browsers and assistive technology. We don't need to worry about that. Technical specifications, on the other hand, are a lot more low level and define a lot of the details of how specific tech should work to adhere to those guidelines. So, sorry about the puns. I'm not going to go in super depth here. I'm just going to attempt to demystify these things that sort of end up being giant walls of text, and then we can spend some time talking about why it all matters. So the first guideline that we are worried about is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It's the big one, the mainstream one. You probably should know something about this one. Pronounced WCAG or WCAG or something else, I don't know. People come up with the craziest things sometimes. It's run by the W3C. It sets standard criterion to conform to, so it actually sets out expectations of what things should do and behave and the outcome of them rather than how you should get there and what they need to be specified as. And then it has conformance levels, so A, AA, AAA. AAA is usually like for specialty applications, like accessibility-specific ones. AA is the standard. That's probably what you're going to be aiming for. And the WCAG is organized by principle, and it uses the POR framework. So POR is perceivable, operable, understandable, robust. Perceivable means that users need to be able to understand the information being presented. It can't be invisible to any of their senses. It might include stuff like including alt text for people who rely on hearing. Operable, pretty self-explanatory, means people can use your stuff. Sorry. I am having a slight technical difficulty here. I don't know why there's a focus trap here. Somebody should tell them about that. Anyway, operable means people can use your stuff. They don't get focus trapped. Might include things like being able to use a keyboard instead of a mouse. And understandable, it means users can comprehend your stuff and it's clear how to use it. Includes stuff like adding labels and descriptions. Robust means basically that your stuff needs to be built well enough that it can be used reliably by a variety of assistive tech. Means things like structuring your HTML properly. And let's take a quick look-see. Cue technical. Yep. So here is our wall of text. Very exciting. The way that this is organized, like I said, is these perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And if we go to one of these, we're looking at the first one, text alternatives. So we have our principle, perceivable. Then we have our guideline here. This is text alternatives. Underneath that, we have our first success criterion. And this one is 1.1.1. So if you ever see those in an audit, that's what that means. And it says level A. So this applies to basically everyone. What it's saying is all non-text content that is presented to the user has a text alternative that serves equivalent purpose. So that would be something like an alt text that will then get used as audible speech. Over here, we have things that help with this, very specific. These are supporting materials. They are not part of the spec, but they are very helpful. The second guideline is the authoring tool accessibility guidelines. This is the meta one. You might need to know something about it because most of the stuff that we work on today actually includes content being uploaded somewhere and then doing something with that content. I don't know. Canva is particularly relevant to this because it has two parts. Make the tool interface accessible so people can actually use your tool, and then support the production of accessible content from that tool. So slides like these should be accessible, theoretically. It's like the WCAG divided into principles, guidelines, and criteria. Wall of text, slightly different wall of text this time. But if we look at the table of contents here, we have authoring, make the authoring tool user interface accessible. That's principle 1. And then principle 2, or B, is support the production of that accessible content. Underneath those principles, we have our guidelines. And a guideline is essentially, works the same way as the WCAG. We've got our, basically, ensure that non-web-based functionality is accessible, which means things. But if we're curious about what that means, we could do something like click here and learn more about what that means. This one is saying that it applies to level A, same as the WCAG one. So that is ATAG, WCAG, ARIA, Accessible Rich Internet Applications is the techie one that you probably still got to know some stuff about. It's essentially a way to define universal semantics that convey user interface, behaviors, and structural information. What that means is that operating systems like Windows and Mac have their ideas of what a user interface component can be. They have their buttons, their menus, their tree grids, God forbid, and each of those are a little bit different. ARIA is the web's version of that. It's here's how all of that works on the webs. It's all browsers share this rather than using the native operating system ones. It specifies role states and properties, and then it specifies how those role states and properties should map to those different languages and environments, like operating systems, browsers, assistive tech, and HTML. It's a very large simplification, but I promise it's not that bad. So ARIA is a little bit different. It doesn't use that principle, guideline, and criterion. It is the part that you probably care about most is these roles. And specifically, probably widget roles. I don't know. These might sound familiar. Button, checkbox, link, menu item. And if we go into one of these, like menu, we can get a little information about what this is, and then it will use things like all caps, big, bold, should, may, must, should not. Those are important things. Those are called normative language, and they are the actual requirements. It might also say things like allowed child roles. So this is saying that a menu can only really have a menu item or a menu item checkbox or menu item radio or a separator as its children. It cannot have a button or a list or something else that is very pretty and exciting, but cool. So those are the specs. That's WCAG, ATAG, and ARIA. What is not a spec, which is arguably sometimes more important? Legislation, like the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 508, are not specs. There is no such thing as ADA compliance. Your clients will probably ask you that, though. And obligatory, I am not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice. Please talk to your people. Again, back to normative versus informative. The easiest way to differentiate between what is a requirement and a recommendation is normative language. Normative words include things like must not, required, shall not, should not, recommended, may, and optional. They're in all caps and bold, and they are sprinkled throughout those specs. A URL that includes w3.org does not mean it's a spec. Easy mistake. There are lots of supporting materials that do live in this area, and they are helpful, but they are not specs. WCAG has a bunch of different documents that you might find by Googling things about the WCAG. They're really helpful for explaining how to do things to meet the WCAG and what the WCAG is actually trying to say, but they are not specs. ARIA has the Authoring Practices Guide, which is really important, and we'll talk about it. ATAG has their own, and let's look at the APG real quick. The APG is aspirational. It is a demonstration of how ARIA should work. I'm going to switch over here. Gosh, this is so much easier. I don't know why I was afraid of showing you my extensions up here. Cool. This looks a little bit like a design system. It's not a design system. It's aspirational. This is how demonstrations of how to use ARIA and some recommendations and best practices. But it is inherently not production code. It is not tested with users or with assistive technology, so it'll often have things that are how it should work, but in reality, not so great. And of course, they are underfunded, so like they can't go and test that all for us. So in practice, I will also often have folks pop into our Slack support channel and be like, I have this experience and I am not sure how to make it accessible, putting aside that they hopefully thought about it a bit earlier in the process. I want to go a little bit through how I approach these sorts of situations. Let's start by talking about user expectations, because accessibility is really about creating user expectations and how we honor those expectations. And it does actually go both ways. So user expectations are mainly informed by 4 things. It's the content structure on the page, how that content is visually presented, what it does, and how it compares to other things that they've used. So how do we signal to users what they should expect from our user interface? The first thing we might do is ask, what does it look like? What components am I using to present it? What visual hierarchy have I created? What affordances have I used? And what am I communicating with those affordances? And with the content structure, it's if we strip away all the visuals, turn off CSS, what structure actually communicates the right hierarchy, grouping, and functionality in terms of HTMLs, but also in terms of like which ARIA roles that we choose. What does it do? Does it navigate to a new page? Does it open an overlay? Does it change a setting? Is it content being submitted in a form? And what else is it like? Is it something that Google uses on Google Slides? Is it a different page on canva.com? Is it similar to something that's native on my computer? So this is a very simple horizontal navigation. You might see at the top of a website. There's top-level links, and then there's a sub-level below that. Let's ask ourselves the first question. So what does it look like? Well, we've got vertically spaced items up top. Then there's a vertical group that's below one item, that shop item. And then it's got a triangle underneath that shop item, so we can, and then the item's text is a little bit smaller, so we can safely assume that those items are sub-items of shop. What does it do? Well, it navigates to a new page. But what do we now have to ask, like, what content structure does it have? Well, we said links a lot. It's probably a list of links. And it looks a little bit like this if we turn off the CSS over here. What if we decided that this sort of looks like a menu instead? And we use the menu bar ARIA role pattern, which I get it. Like the APG actually shows an example a lot like this, and it sort of kind of visually lines up. I hate the APG for doing that, but whatever. However, if we strip away the visuals from the previous slide, by giving this a menu bar role, we are essentially saying it's equivalent to this native menu bar. I don't think your site navigation is serving the same purpose as this. Probably not. So instead, we might use a simple disclosure pattern saying we have a button, and clicking that button will show or hide the list of links below it. Here's another example. We've got these buttons that are attached to one another, and one of them has a press state. We can tell by those shadows, except for Apple down here, who would rather be flat than usable. But they are grouped together, and they have a press state, so we can assume that only one option can be pressed at a time. So what do we think this is? Who thinks that they are buttons? Who thinks that they're radio inputs? Trick question. This one's actually a bit weird, and there's no real correct answer. This is based on a real question asked by Sarah Suidin a couple years ago. A lot of people chimed in saying they'd mark this up as a radio role. However, Leonie Watson came in and said, I'd use a button. Leonie Watson is a screen reader user. She's director of, I think, Tetralogical, an accessibility consultancy, and she also happens to now be the chair of the W3C board of directors. So she kind of knows her stuff. Her point was that by using radio buttons on something that looks like a button, we've actually created a mismatch of visuals and behaviors, which would affect keyboard users, but also sighted screen reader users. So if we go back to what user expectation have we created with those buttons, well, we made a thing that looks like buttons, so users might expect it to act like buttons. They'd expect tab to move to the next button, and space to activate that button. Radio groups, on the other hand, use an entirely different interaction model. They use arrow keys instead of tab, and selection changes as we arrow, rather than needing to press enter or space. So again, a little bit back and forth. Okay, so we have our question that someone is asking us, and we have a guess. I think this X role applies. Now what? Well, the first thing we'll do is ask, is there a design system component that already does this? Can we use it? Is there an HTML equivalent? Can we use that? Please use those. Are there design modifications that would make it clearer? So if this is a search combo box, do we need to add a search icon? Something like that. And then what ARIA role most matches user expectations for this context? So maybe if we're on a home page and I have a button that drops down a list of options, that might be a show and hide list of links or buttons. On the editor itself, which is emulating a desktop application, that might actually be a menu instead, because it is, in fact, similar to those native menu bars up at the top. So when I feel like I have a good guess on what role would apply to something, this is what I like to do. Find examples in the wild, determine exceptions, in my case and in their cases, and then reference the spec. So if an example would be like I was asked about our search combo box. It had an interaction where you would arrow down and then press enter, and that would take you to a new page with those search results. I thought this might be wrong because I looked at APG and their version said that enter should fill in the combo box with the thing that you picked, and then pressing enter again should submit that search. So the first thing that I would want to do is research what other folks are doing in other design systems and other big apps, and then what is recommended by the APG, and then what is in all of those supporting materials about the WCAG. In this case, the first thing I did was look at the most famous search box of all time, google.com. And Google actually submits the search when you press enter on an item. So hang on, the APG doesn't say that. If Google does it, it should be right? Like, first of all, heck no. Like, Google messes up all the time. But I sort of doubted they'd mess it up so badly on literally google.com, hopefully. Another example might be our dialog pattern. So the APG says when a dialog opens, you should focus the first thing inside of that dialog that's focusable. But instead, we at Canva focus the dialog itself often, which then announces its name and purpose and lets us reliably attach keyboard listeners so that we can press escape to close it, even if there's nothing focusable inside of it. Recently, actually, the HTML native dialog that's come out does exactly the same thing. So APG, recommendation. I added some bonus spice for you because I can't put stuff on Twitter anymore. Design system traps, accessibility edition. The first thing that tends to crop up with these ALI accessibility design system crossover is the idea that shared visual attributes means you should use the same components. If it looks sort of similar, does not mean it should be built the same. Visuals are only one part of that equation of user expectations, or zero part if you're fully blind, actually. An example would be using the same exact components with some different props on a menu button with a menu dropdown versus a button that just shows and hides a list of buttons. Technically, it can be accessible, but you're putting a real large onus on your consumers to understand the nuances of menus versus disclosures. Anything you can do to help them with some guardrails will be good. This leads into the flexibility will save us. Your accessibility team is crying silent tears when they hear this because their next audit is going to suck. When you make things more flexible, that actually puts more onus on your team to create accessible guidelines and patterns, not less work because you let things get customized to their needs. If you give it to them, they will use it, often poorly. They're probably not going to read the docs, and they're definitely not going to tell you about what they did. And if you want to change it later, good luck. So there is a balance. Composability is really important, but it is important to actually make sure that you include appropriate opinions, else it's just a free-for-all. And the third trap is, but big, well-funded company does it this way. Spoiler, no one knows what they're doing. No. Even the big ones with a lot of money. Fun story, I was the first hire on the Spectrum design system at Adobe, and I was the one that was in charge of their accessibility strategy. I had no idea what I was doing. I was 1 year out of college. They have better people now, thankfully. And beware of Frankenponents. Frankenponents are the things that happen when we try and create new UI patterns from existing ones without understanding why they are the way they are today. An example might be like you're making a menu, and you have a menu option that you want to add a tooltip to because like you want to add some more information about what that thing does. Simple change, right? Well, menu, they use arrow keys. You're arrowing up and down on your menu, and then how are you going to get to that tooltip with your keyboard? Because all you have are arrow keys. I don't know, probably going to be broken. It can also be the result of allowing custom children into a component with a strict role. If we take a look at the ARIA spec, we know that tree grid is a little bit of a hecked up thing, but tree grid can have children that are rows or row groups, and row groups can have children that are rows. This is an example of a tree grid where they essentially open up a slot where anybody can put whatever component that fits their needs. The resulting tree of this is tree grid, row, row group, row, row, row. And then we get to generic, which is not a row. And then we get to heading and paragraph, which are definitely not rows. So this is going to be broken in basically every screen reader. But like the designer who sees that they can add this in, bring their own components and shove it into the slot is not going to know. They're going to assume that the design system team actually did that testing. And it's not really fair to expect every designer and developer to know how a tree grid should work in accessibility. It's not realistic. But if you're that person, come talk to me because we're hiring. Anyway, when in doubt, preference consistency. So consistency across your application and across like similar use cases. Refer to those normative resources, those should not, must have. And then remember that accuracy and support is more important than theoretical correctness. So if the EPG has a really beautiful pattern that you think is like perfect, but you test it and it's relying on something like ARIA Flow 2, which is not well supported, is not going to be great. Ask experts, ask your accessibility team, use the web accessibility Slack, it's free and open, and test with real users, with different assistive technology. Fun fact, Windows accounts for 80% of screen reader users, so please don't only test with VoiceOver, because it's inevitably going to be broken. Thank you. That is all I have for you today.
All right, question 1. If/when you find convention out in the wild conflicts with Spec, do you have some sort of decision-making framework to navigate a way forward, or just religiously adhere to Spec?
Generally, the philosophy I like to take is if it works in a screen reader, but it's not actually to Spec, then I don't use it because it's not reliable and it might change later on. If it's available in the spec, it's probably fine. The framework is that find examples, determine exemptions, and test. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great. We do have another one here. How do you convince stakeholders to approve a budget for accessibility?
Oh boy. Here you go. I'll sit
For a
back
lot of
down.
people here, I guess.
That's a whole other talk, mate. But one of the things that is really stuck with me from Matt May, who I used to work with at Adobe, is the business case for accessibility sucks. So using the legal scare does not work very well, but instead getting people on your side and trying to get them to do the right thing, because it is, in fact, a civil right that people can use your stuff, works a little bit better.
Fantastic, thank you.
Right. Thanks so much, Sarah. Alrighty, so our final speakers for the evening come from Service New South Wales, and I guess for a little bit of context for our people dialing in from overseas, I suppose the easiest way to make the comparison for Service New South Wales is that it's like the DMV in the US, but for us. So in their talk, Rich and Tris, who are going to be up in a moment, are going to peel back the curtain a little bit on their design system journey into Service New South Wales. And I guess like for an organisation as big as that, I'm sure it comes with its fair share of bumps and bruises. So please join me in welcoming Rich and Tris to the stage. Do the last switcheroo. Here we go.
Okay. Thank you, Rich. You're Rich. I'm Rich as well. Principal Product Designer and Design System team. Tris here today. Joining me.
Hi. I'm Tris. I'm the Senior Product Designer in the Design System in Service New South Wales as well.
And we're excited to talk about and share a bit of our journey the last 4.5 years at Service New South Wales Design System team. So again, thanks for the opportunity to come and chat. I've been at Service for 4.5 years. I was the first founding full-time designer in the team back in 2020. Tris has been with us 3.5 years too, so we've seen, as Rich said, a few bumps and bruises along the way. Today you hear a bit about our setup at Digital Services, our backstory, what shaped us, how we built our community. Some of you guys may be included in that. How we've adapted our ways of working. I think that's really important. And we'll show you a few case studies and some quick demos. And then how we've approached the major update across 70 product teams at Service that have had to take on this challenge. And we'll leave you with a few tips if we get towards the end and some time for Q&A. I just want to start with a quick story about a growing city. So imagine a rapidly expanding city where new buildings are rising weekly. Each one's a little bit different. And they follow a little bit different rules, different architects. And imagine rebuilding these things slightly over and over again. It's sort of draining the resources and slows down development and makes it really impossible to meet the demands of the citizens. So this city really needs a more unified approach to creating a cohesive city for its people, where each building fits in seamlessly. This is our challenge at Service New South Wales 4 years ago. Product teams building their own services, each time a little bit differently. And so the Service New South Wales design system, we call the GEL, Global Experience Language, was formed to help address some of this. And today we'll share our story.
So at Service New South Wales, we have this vision to become the world's most customer-centric government and the single front door to government services. And I think this really embodies all the department that's within the Service New South Wales. The area that we're looking after, which is the GEL, we call it GEL, very creative. Global Experience Language, collection of reusable components to kind of support the teams to deliver that. We have the components accompanied by clear standards and guidance. We are striving to be accessible by default because we're government. Using the legal angle always works. And make sure that what we build is scalable. And within the GEL, we really apply these 4 guiding principles: scalable, consistent, flexible, and accessible. We truly put this into action in everything that we do, and every design considerations that we put into a component or a pattern. And it's to a point where we probably don't necessarily do a lot of posters on the wall and things like that anymore. We're just like, okay, is it accessible? No. Is it robust? Is it flexible? Can we apply it to multiple teams? That sort of thing. Just a quick setup. some of you probably be familiar with the New South Wales government design system, the digital design system, or DDS as we call it, which is separate to the GEL service New South Wales that we're in. We support teams to build digital products, as well as some key partners like Revenue New South Wales, for example. Whereas the DDS kind of look into the broader New South Wales government in terms of, publication, like printings and things like that. So there are slight differences there. So that's the setup. I'll let Rich continue on with the...
So the early days, yeah, we actually started with a Word doc, not even joking. Actually a password protected Word doc, even worse. So I probably was that without the moustache and less hair, but I probably was that guy, because I did actually lose the password pretty soon, as you can see. So a style guide of sorts, that design systems have been born from brand guidelines. Brand guidelines have been around for decades and decades. And there were some components, to be fair, in Storybook for our developers, but from our business team, but little to no documentation how to use a lot of this stuff. This is a quick snapshot of an audit we did of a bunch of little mini design system libraries from various different portfolios and different areas of the business. So this is a business case in itself. There's 250 different sort of shades of the core color palette, of which was actually just 9 colors as the core. So it was pretty clear that many teams needed similar things, building the same things over and over again. So in 2020, life changed pretty quickly for everyone all around the world. For starters, we hadn't even met each other, the team that I went into. There was 5 or 6 of us that were formed, 4 developers, PM and myself. Hadn't met each other for the first 6 months, remote working as we all think of it today. The normal was completely brand new. So when you look at on that screen and you've got COVID, rapid expansion to all product teams, we had to deliver design and discover, check-ins, vouchers, grants in a very short space of time, about 8 weeks. If you chuck in a few extra things like bushfires, some more floods, even mouse plagues, it goes on and on. So with that increased a massive demand from government, so they were looking to us to meet those demands. In terms of scale, we started in 2018 before I joined, but around 50 people. Come 2020, when the GEL team formed, there were about 300, and now we're 2024, 700 plus. So we went through this sort of hyper growth phase, mostly due to a bit of COVID and general digital transformation. And I think everyone's asked for a slight little plug about I'm hiring and I'm hiring. Unfortunately, Services of Ours is definitely not hiring at the moment. So yeah, that's the bit of a difference. So we set about building from the ground up, making progress to construct design standards, principles, content guidelines, lots more components, and finally we launched the website. But none of this stuff is done in isolation, and that's the important thing about design system team. We work with the design and tech leaders to help drive some of these initiatives. For example, one of our mobile principal designers was leading the charge with a group on design principles. I was in another group working with them on experience standards. And like I said, about 18 months later, we had a dedicated GEL website. We started in Confluence. It's great, but it's a bit of the Wild West out there. So the sooner you can get, for a design system team, the sooner you can get out into a dedicated website. It means it's the one central place. Unfortunately, we did that, but not with Storybook, not with code integrated, sadly. But that is something to be. And if you're online trying to search for the service New South Wales GEL, you won't find it. Day one from me, I was a bit like, why is this blocked? But we are working on it. I think I've said that for about 4.5 years. But hopefully it will come. So we launched this website. We're feeling pretty damn good. If you don't know who this is Bastian and Falcor. And if you don't know which movie it's from, go and ask someone who's a Gen X or a Gen Y. So we did truly become the front door to government, and they did look to us.
Okay. So in the next section, I just want to touch about the people side of things. Often when we look into design system, we think about components, buttons, guidance, all the artifacts. But majority of the things that does make a difference is the people. So I want to talk about community, the building of community and relationships. A design system isn't just about components, it's also about managing the teams that you're working with, that you're supporting. And sometimes you need momentum, it definitely doesn't happen overnight. You need sort of that level of perseverance and really just patience, really. There's no quick win for most of the time. Occasionally, an opportunity comes around, which we're probably going to touch shortly. But the long-term payoff is worth it, we think. And it's really incredibly rewarding to see a unified community to actually drive the whole organization into a different direction. And this is not something that you can do just by ourselves or just within our team as well, and we're here to recognize that. One story that we can share with you is our migration story to Figma from Sketch, Abstract, and InVision. Just to show the power of community. So we went to like any other companies, we moved from Sketch to Figma, and in order to deliver a smooth transition, we make sure that we understand our community and the people and what the needs. Obviously, it comes at a time where people are a bit uncertain or like, oh, I'm not sure, I never used Figma before. Yes, there are those people out there. So yeah, we ran a large Figma knowledge survey to understand pain points and where people are anxious about. And then we create a program. We create a Figma Ambassador program to tailor those issues, or to tackle those issues. And help really with migration in terms of knowledge transfer as well as the general admin work of the various workspaces that is in our Figma account. We also run a lunch and learn session called Figma Bites, which is a very practical, hands-on kind of 30-minute session. And these are hosted by the Figma Ambassador themselves. So we really tap into people's expertise in delivering that. And in the end, we managed to get that transition happening in just slightly under 8 weeks, migrating about 200 plus design files across 150 designers. So that was a pretty smooth delivery. And again, I don't think we can do it just by ourselves, like try to, as many Slack messages or email as we can. This is really reaching out to the people and say, hey, you're good at that, you're good at that. Can we lean in on you to help bring the organization forward? So yeah, that's one of the rare opportunities that came about. On top of that, we also continue to listen and evolve. I think, often we also have this vision of what the successful design team looks like. But a lot of where we are now here is as a result of just continue to adapt, really. So things that we didn't think about before. We mature our operational process and integrate Slack workflows for support questions. We created a bunch of SOPs, SOPs as we like to call it. We even recognize that some questions through Slack you don't get the nuance of the challenge that the teams is experiencing. So we offered office hours for an extended discussion. So we're a bit more approachable in that way, so people can come in and ask their questions, or even just if they need a sounding board, whether the thing is accessible or I'm not sure if it's accessible enough, things like that. And we continue to refine our contribution process as well. We start with one model, we continue to evolve. That could be a whole presentation in itself. Just finding the right balance there. Back on the artifact side of things, we created accessibility annotation kit and gel wireframe kit. These are, again, things that we didn't thought about before. We tap into the community and really truly understand their workflow and the challenges that they have on a day-to-day. Like the gel wireframe kit is there to enable a rapid low fidelity concepting because, in some areas we need to move fast. And this is one way of us supporting that as well. So that's about sort of listening and evolving. On top of listening, we also look into the data. For example, 74% of submitted design questions were about usage and implementation. That tells us that we need to work on some areas of documentation. But we don't stop there. Recently as well, we've started integrating all the data that we are interested in into a Looker Studio dashboard. So we can see the library usage, the version that people are on, Figma detachment rates, and any trends in like, ooh, there's something interesting there. Maybe there's something we can tap into a few people in the team to kind of understand more about. So try not to rely on one signal alone, but it's just seeing all the different signals and create that stories all together. So that's the things that we've been getting from community, essentially.
I'm going to tell you a quick case study about how we've changed a team from being a detractor to actually a promoter. And I think this is true for any brand, regardless of design systems. We want to be making sure that experience is great so they can promote it. So people can be resistant to change. We're all probably resistant to change at some point. And this particular team we worked with, actually quite a critical team at Service New South Wales, that under the hood sort of verify a lot of the documentation for us to be able to pay our radios or working with children checks and things. And we set up building in React because most of our product teams were using React code base, but this team were in Vue. They had limited engineering resources and were always busy. But over time, through some of the things that Tris just mentioned about the development of processes, operational procedures, and sort of leaning into them a little bit and offering a bit more support, they actually began to see the value and they actually shifted from Vue to React. So I'm talking to you today about them, and they've become our biggest fan since the upgrade, and they've become our internal case study, a bunch of PDFs, presentations in our guilds, and I'm talking to you about it. How do they do it? They just took one page. So sometimes things can be a little bit confusing or discombobulating. Like, oh God, that seems really complicated, or I kind of will ignore that, put my head in the sand. But this quote came from the case study interview we did with them, was really nice. Embracing the unknown can be empowering. What seems like a mountain is often a molehill when we face it. So they basically took that one screen, and from that gave them the confidence, and they designed over 200 screens. They are able to update all of those 200 screens in 3 days. A couple of days for the QA and engineering to update the code. So usually code takes the longer time, but in this instance, we'll show you a little bit in a second around the storybook. They were able to update it really quickly. So in half a sprint, that's a pretty compelling story to try and get your teams to upgrade. So we're pretty happy with that one. So this next section about rebuilding for a multi-platform on our journey, and we need to do this to scale. So New South Wales Government have actually embarked on a major project to remaster the whole visual language for all government services. So there's like 130 different government agencies that we think of, like the big four: transport, education, health and service, but there's lots of little micro ones that are under there. And they want to drive equity across the government communication. So where do we fit into this? You saw the numbers, 700 people, 70 plus teams. We spoke to health, they had 8 teams. So when you say, how do you get these big things happening? Well, we meet every fortnight, roadmaps, all the stuff we all know about. But for us, we have 70 plus teams. That was just an absolute bit of a nightmare, shall we say. So how do we approach the update? Well, I love this quote. We kind of have to use this in design systems, and maybe you do too, but every problem's an opportunity in disguise. So we reframed how we were doing things, and we took this opportunity to create that greater consistency across all our platforms, across the entire digital ecosystem. So one shared foundations for all of our platforms. So we rebuilt, we've heard from Ryan this morning about tokens. We rebuilt up from the ground up design tokens, a new font, typography styles, icons, pictograms, spacing, you get it. We also used the opportunity to consolidate both our business app, which is new, and our personal app, which is growing. So we also reached out to those teams to make sure that we'd be able to make sure that dark mode, for example, was done. So dark mode, if you remember, was done as part of the digital driver's license. But unfortunately, in the web space, we don't have that, but watch that space. And importantly, this whole piece of work was to align everybody to the greater New South Wales Government. So a major update to all components, which is a pretty big deal. At the same time, we had an initiative called Towards 2030 across the whole of Service New South Wales. And that's like, what does the future look like for citizens of New South Wales? So we use this as an opportunity to test the new UI. Often, we become a bottleneck as a design system team. There's only a finite number of people, and you can see the hundreds of people you're trying to serve. But we use this as an opportunity to gather leadership, design leadership across the business to bring this strategic vision towards 20 to life using the new UI kit. We also took the insights from those domains, so used their expertise, their research, their deep analysis. And we brought these together to solve their problems in a new visual language. We found it really invaluable, but road tested our stuff and found where there were gaps for us to talk about. For example, we had to go back to our brand team and rebuild all of the pictograms because what they supplied to us worked great when they were massive in a kiosk or in a service center, but they're not so good at digital when you put them down into an app. So it's the first cohesive manifestation of our customer experience, and using the design system, it fostered this cross-team collaboration, which is really hard in any big organization.
And that's on the strategic level. On the ground level, we also did some quality of life improvements for the designers and engineers as well. So for engineers, for example, this is an opportunity for us to set up a new foundation moving forward for the web, as well as the app. So we deliver a new React component library. It has we transitioned to monorepo and ESM. It's very technical, I know. No shame in Googling that, I did. TypeScript support, which is like an autocorrect for code, and really feature-ready that code base for theming. What does that mean for teams? Well, the consuming team, consumers or the makers, the teams that we support, that means we can release some components earlier even, so that we can actually get real understanding of the usage of it, and test those and introduce fix before a broader rollout. And then smaller bundles, file size means it's, faster apps, everyone's happy, and explicit component boundaries as well. So practical things that's really improved teams' efficiency. On Figma front side of things, we double down on variables. We quickly adopt typography variables. This came in at the right moment for us. We actually hold back our release by a sprint to incorporate the typography variables so that we can deliver one library file that supports the new theme as well as the old legacy theme into one file. We try to minimize the amount of reliance on plugins, so by architecturing the component so that they can leverage the swap library features one-to-one means that a designer can open their file, do a whole replacement for the entire file, and then only kind of maybe 2-3 components need to be adjusted manually. But we have to hold back some of the refactor work as well intentionally so that it can deliver a smoother transition. So, finding that balance right. We also not just moving to the new library and forget about the old one, we actually add deprecation mode as well onto the old library so that when teams are not ready to move yet, they can still use the old library, but when they're ready, there's a mode they can switch and they can tell them which component needs to be updated. So
when Triz presented it, that guild, that first part of the animation, where he just drags a set of components onto a different canvas that's set to a different mode, the delight in people's faces at seeing basically kind of what's a bit like magic going, hey, here's the existing stuff and just drag it and it works, is down to like great timing, and this guy here did a great job in 2 weeks. Pausing this whole release and then going, let's do it. And then we had a couple of other people on the team that helped out. So
yeah, I think it's worth it to take one step back, but we got 2 steps forward in that scenario. Storybook, we touched a bit as well. Again, in that transition period, we want to make sure that we want to empower, have teams that confidence of knowing what to expect. So we add a theme switcher as well. Kudos to the engineering team to implement this. But that means team can have a look at the components in Storybook and actually see the differences between the theme. As you can see, the accordion is quite different there. The disabled link style is different. So you can actually experience it and kind of know what to expect as well. So that's pretty cool as well. And as Rich mentioned, we delivered the latest Service New South Wales app, now starting to use that new theme, the new visual language as well. It's a start, but there's more to come there as well. So where we are at, we couldn't predict this in the past, but at the moment we're in a good position and we're excited by what the future holds for us because we are now set up for a multi-team, multi-platform gel experience that can ready to take on other platforms like CarPlay, natural user interface. Whatever technology comes around, I think we'll be ready to adapt as well.
Awesome. So we've learned a few things along the way, having this journey for the last 4.5 years. So I thought we'd just leave a couple with you. Design systems not just a design thing, and I think the earlier you can set this message and try and instill a bit of a culture with your leaders and staying close to your practices, the better and the easier it will be to adopt. Good documentation makes all the difference. So if you haven't got a content designer in your design system team, or you haven't even got a design system team yet, but when you do, try and get a content designer. They are worth their weight in gold. That stat, around 74% of designers' questions in our Slack workflows are related to existing documentation. Yeah, maybe designers are a little bit lazy sometimes. We're all designers, so I'm paying myself out at the same time. Don't be offended. But that's true that there's a bit of that, but there's also, we need to do a better job at doing it. More examples, greater flexibility. I know there's a little bit around accessibility, around the flexibility, but less is more sometimes. So being really intentional about what you have in the design system and how it works can be really powerful. Yeah, we do love you, Confluence, but I think I said before, if you can get into your own dedicated space, that'd be great. Third tip, stay in sync with code. Try and release together. We struggle with it even now. Things do get missed, even small things, and they come to bite you when someone says, I can find this in Figma, but I can't find it in Storybook, or this looks like this in Storybook. Why does it look like that in Figma? And the flip side is to encourage teams to update their code bases, because when you try and do a major update, it's really difficult if they're not up to date with their code. And the last one, it is a bit of a long journey, and I guess the progress over perfection theme today was about you don't get everything right first time. You might want to try, and we're all trying to do our best each day at work, but it does take a time. They take time to mature design systems, and they do take time to build a community, but it is really worth it. And finally, just lean into those practice leaders you have, and use others to help you drive the adoption, because it does take the whole company to really drive things forward. Thanks for your time today.
Around the time. I do have a question. I don't know how to word it, so I'm going to try to
Don't know how to word it. Okay.
figure it out as I plug my thing back in.
Going in?
Let's try this. I guess you've touched on a few things. Like, I guess a big part about design systems is, I guess, the relationships, right? Like converting people from detractors or to promoters, as you put it. You mentioned things like the Figma modes dragging thing that you did, and when people's faces light up on those things. You mentioned the wireframe kits and the office hours. Were there any other things that you tried that had like this unexpected benefit with regards to buy-in that you can kind of share? Because we're talking government. It's
Government with security, donuts seems to work pretty well for
donuts,
getting security in plugins,
Nice.
Figma plugins through. Designers, I don't know. I don't know if there's any. We put it all out on the line, guys. Like we did lots of so many different things. I mean, things for efficiency for us. Yeah. We reached a bit of a point. I guess if you were to make it, it'd probably be a bell curve. So the first couple of years, I guess, if you take our sort of 4 or 5 year journey, is first couple of years you're driving hard and building out the components, the documentation, improving it. And then you get into sort of patterns, maybe year 2, when you're starting to get more complex with things. And then you kind of reach a point where there isn't like thousands of components. Yes, there might be Figma UI kits on the internet that are free, and there's 3,000 components and stuff. But actually operating them, maintaining them, building them, it's not for everyone. So I think the last couple of years of our journey has been more about expanding, doubling down, reiterating, improving. We joked about contribution. One day maybe we'll come back and talk about contribution, because I can't remember who said it, that everyone thinks they got their shit sorted. That's a bit like contributions for design systems, because we've spoken to Gov UK, Westpac, Atlassian, who else, Triz? IAG, Marc, before I met him here. And everyone's looking for the same thing. You're trying to do the best you can, or the best that suits you at that point in time. But all you've got to do is keep learning, keep listening, using data, using people, to try and progress it and make it and evolve it. So yeah, I can't think of one. I didn't really answer your question necessarily, but
You did say donuts.
I just say that. That was just the security.
One word. It's very effective. The round. It's
Relatable.
very relatable. So it's nice one. I think that's it for these guys. I will do the kind of like wrap up of the speakers now. So that does wrap up the talks for this evening. So let's give one final round of applause to our speakers this evening. This will make more sense to the people that are online, but there's a FigJam board which we'll be keeping open for questions if you want to ask to the presenters, which we'll kind of pass on to them if that ends up closing. But you can always reach out to us or them directly on LinkedIn. That's also fine. But I will pass it back now to Marc to bring us home.
Let's try. What we got? So what's next? I mean, we're not going to stop here. So we're planning on doing the next one probably in March, April next year. So, but hold on, no, there's a spoiler. Let's start with the other one first. I said there's a little announcement that we have towards the end of the talk in regards to the Design Conference. And what that is, we have 2 tickets to give away for everyone attending the meetup today. So if you check this QR code there, that should take you to a Google form where you just enter your details. If you would like to attend the session in May next year, we're going to draw 2 potential winners from that raffle. And we'll probably reach out tomorrow-ish to the 2 winners. Please just consider if you actually want to make it, if you actually want to attend. It'd be good. It's open to all attendees attending this meetup here today, so please don't share it around because we're going to check if you were here or not. And also, spoiler alert, because we're in Australia, it's going to be at 2 a.m., so it's a bit of a commitment if you want to actually go to it. But we have these 2 tickets available, so sign up, give it a try. We'll reach out tomorrow. And we're also looking for more hosts and more speakers. So like I said, in April or March next year, we haven't really figured that out yet. We want to hold the next one. It's definitely not going to be at this location, so stay tuned where it might be. It might be somewhere else. It might be, we don't know. We'll see. It might be. Actually, it has to be, right? It has to be. Not just might be. But yeah, again, thanks to the speakers for today's talks. Today, we really had 2 out of 3 talks were very design engineering focused and accessibility focused. So for next time, maybe, some product managers want to speak, give a talk, would be great. We're really interested to hear from anyone that works actively on design system. It doesn't matter what job title you are, what domain you're in. You don't have to be a seasoned speaker for this, so this is really an opportunity for anyone to get in front of people and practice their sort of like public speaking skills and presentation skills. This QR code gets you to the speaker application. If you want to become a host, just reach out to Rich or myself or to Michael. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's a wrap. So for those online, thank you for dialing in. So again, thanks everyone for joining today. It was great, and please stick around. We have a bit more time for mingling and drinks.
Thanks everyone.